Project Hail Mary is the latest sci-fi blockbuster coming out of Hollywood starring Ryan Gosling. I've been looking forward to this for a couple of years because a couple of years ago, a bit of this filming actually took place just down the road here in Portsmouth on South Prey Pier. So I was really looking forward to see a little bit of Pompey on the big screen for a change. The story starts with a man waking up on a spaceship out of a coma. He doesn't know who he is, he's lost his memory. Two other crew members are dead, and he slowly has to rebuild his memory. And we see what happened in flashbacks. His name is Grace. He's a science teacher and a disgraced physicist. We learn that the sun is actually dying due to some sort of energy being siphoned off from the sun to Venus by these strange sort of amoeba single-celled creatures that are known as astrophages. One of the reasons why Grace is disgraced is because he wrote a paper that wasn't accepted and he got into some argument with a scientist and he lost his job. But a government agency has seen merit in this study and his work, and they bring on to do some work to try and find out what's going on with these things and what are they actually doing, why are they siphoning off energy from the sun towards Venus. Grace figures this out, and as a reward, he's brought onto the main project, a project called Project Hail Mary, which is send 3 astronauts into deep space to a star called Tau Ceti, which, according to the research, is the only star in the local area that isn't being eaten up by these astrophages. An accident kills 2 of the astronauts, including the main scientist, and because of that, Grace is forced to join the mission, which is how he ended up where he is. While in space, another ship appears out of nowhere and rendezvous with him. Grace is able to get on board a certain way, and he meets another alien, the only surviving crew member of this other ship. It's a kind of rock spider-like alien that doesn't have a face or eyes, but it does have a form of communication. So Grace names this alien Rocky, and gradually they work out a way of communicating. Grace uses the noises and associations and is able to build up a language. Somehow he conveniently has the right software required to build up, let's say, put words to noises and build them together and have a translation. Very convenient. So they work together to try and figure out what's going on, as Rocky's planet is also in the same position as Earth's. They figure out they need to go to a planet near this Tau Ceti sun, where the astrophages are also siphoning the energy, just like with Venus. And after a risky attempt to capture some samples from the atmosphere, Grace is put in peril due to a malfunction in the ship. Rocky, who actually has to cocoon himself in sort of these tunnels because of the atmosphere he lives in is very different, actually breaks out, rescues Grace, and in the process almost dies. He risks his life to save his friend. When Grace is woken up, he actually then does the work on the samples, figures out exactly what's going on, comes up to the solution to save both Earth and Rocky's planet. And Rocky, spoiler alert, survives. They send samples back to Earth, but instead of Grace going back to Earth, he actually goes back with Rocky. There's a whole twist behind that. And the samples get back to Earth, which is now in an ice age. And Grace goes back with Rocky and sort of makes a life there for himself until he decides to go back. And everyone's happy. The end. So first of all, let's talk about the downside. The Portsmouth bit was cut from the film. And I think I know why. When you look at the photos that people took from drones and from little boats when it was happening, it looked like Ryan Gosling was just leaning on the railings at the end of the pier, looking out into the sea. Clearly, this is supposed to be one of those deep thinking moments. There is a moment when, after the accident that kills the scientists, the head of the project, Strat, name is, asks Grace if he'll take on the role as the main scientist on the mission and go into space. It cuts back to the present time, and then it goes back again, and he says no, at which point he's basically forced to. He's put into an induced coma, and that's how he ends up on the ship. So I think that Portsmouth scene was in between. He's told he needs to make. He's asked if he wants to go on the mission. He was then filmed thinking about it, and then he came back and said no, and then he got put on the mission anyway, which makes sense. They cut it because it would have just been kind of unnecessary and a bit cliched as well. It's a shame because actually it was a big thing locally when it was happening. It was all over social media. People were really excited. They know this big Hollywood star is in Portsmouth, but we didn't get to see Portsmouth represented on Hollywood, sadly. But there you go. These things happen. So what's a really good thing about this? Well, the CGI in this is restrained. Yes, it is a CG heavy film, but it also isn't. It's not like the CG you get in a Marvel film or a DC film or Star Wars or whatever. It's all very, as I say, restrained. They've really gone for quality. Most of the CGI is in outer space and it's with two ships. The most complicated CGI is with Rocky, but it's all very. There aren't that many CGI elements to it. So it looks like they've been able to really go for quality and quantity. We hear horror stories about these CGI production houses where people are working 20 hours a day and just sleeping in the office to get these horrific timelines met, these deadlines met. It just sounds just horrific, kind of a Hollywood equivalent of a Bangladeshi sweatshop. This looks like it probably wasn't like that because, as I say, there aren't many elements to it. It's really about sort of the moving through the scenes as opposed to having thousands of robot soldiers fighting the Avengers or anything like that. Ryan Gosling is the only big name in this movie, which had a budget of about $248 million. It was really the only significant character. The whole thing rests on him and the animation of Rocky. The only other significant actor is Sandra Hüller, who plays Strat, who's the head of the project, but she's not a big name. So really it is all about Gosling and the CGI Rocky. Talking about Rocky itself, this is an absolutely fantastic alien. It's a great concept. It kind of looks like a spider in the way its legs move, but it acts like a dog, a really loving dog, and I think that's pretty much exactly what they were going for. Although it does talk as well, it communicates. It can even, I say, has elements of cat behaviour as well. So even though it's supposed to be Rocky, it's actually very cute, very endearing, very sweet, simply because of the way they had him behaving, and also in terms of the sort of pidgin English it uses. There are some big scientific issues, and if you're a bit of a science nerd, you will be probably screaming at this, especially in terms of deep space travel and traveling at the speed of light, which is exactly what would have been the case in this. But the thing is, it's actually not that important. The plot is about two intelligent beings from two completely different worlds coming together, overcoming basic communication problems, and working together to solve a major problem that's going to save their worlds, humanity and whatever the aliens call themselves. The science in this story is actually the least important part. In fact, there isn't really that much science going on at all, especially in terms of them trying to figure out what's happening with these astrophages and why they're doing one thing around Earth, Sun, and why they're doing something completely different around this Tau Ceti. So this is a story about overcoming barriers and building friendships across cultures and languages, and also sacrificing yourself for others, even when you don't have anyone to sacrifice for. A big point is made that the two astronauts that Grace has gone with have children and partners, their families. Grace doesn't have anyone, but he still is willing to sacrifice himself. Okay, strictly speaking, not because he wasn't actually being brave. This is not a film about courage under extreme circumstances, even though some of that does. In this plot, it is emphasizing that he is actually a bit of a coward. He actually does, spoiler alert, he does refuse initially to go on the mission and is forced into going on the mission. So it's not really about overcoming cowardice, but he is sacrificing. Towards the end, he comes to terms with the sacrifice he has to make, and he's happy with that. It's 2.5 hours long, but that does actually feel right. I wasn't bored in any way, even though this is not the most exciting film either. It's not whiz bang, pew 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 or anything like that. And it didn't have any with the big special effects, as I say. There's really no fat, there's no dead weight, there are no pointless subplots, no silly romances. So despite the 2.5 hour runtime, this actually has a very tight script. Now this film isn't brilliant for sure, but it is very good. It has a very engaging plot, and you really care about the characters. You care about Grace, and you really, really care about Rocky. This whole story keeps its focus on what's important, and it doesn't get bogged down in minutiae like the science of speed of light travel and all that stuff. It's not what the plot is about. So this film is definitely worth going to see. I really did enjoy it. It's a really refreshing to see something, even though it's not technically an original story. It's actually based on a novel. It's not from some sort of big existing franchise. They put a lot of money into this big budget story from a novel that no one's ever heard of. That's the kind of thing we want to see more of in Hollywood, well, they're not necessarily spending that money on the budget. So it's definitely worth watching, even if your cinema has raised its ticket prices, especially for this film, which is what View at Gunwolf Keys did. So definitely, this is a recommendation. Go and see Project Hail Mary. It's definitely worth the 2.5 hours.